Hi, I'm Ned Phillips, Vice President of Community Relations for Palm Mortuary in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's a pleasure to be here and introduce to you our partnership with Larry Capetto, filmmaker, and filming a documentary called Lest They Be Forgotten, Las Vegas. It's effective means of preserving history. I remember World War II. I remember parts of World War II. I was very young. I remember my father coming home in 1946 after the war. I was 4 years old. I'm grateful for the freedoms that we have as a result of these veterans sacrificing for our freedom. So I felt that it was important to partner with Larry so that we could provide a documentary for Las Vegas, a history of those World War II veterans telling their story here in Las Vegas. I think the story of these veterans that you will see in this documentary will reinforce what our freedoms are all about and the fact that we need to fight for our freedoms. And I'm grateful for those that have fought before me in all wars that preserve our freedom here in the United States. Hopefully this film will reinforce and reinstill in people's hearts the patriotic feelings toward any American that has fought for freedom. Thank you so much for your sacrifice, and I'm grateful for the fact that you're willing to participate in this film and share some stories that perhaps you've never shared before.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
On December 7th, I was living in Las Vegas. I had been living here for nearly a couple of years with my family. Came here in the late 30s. Of course, we heard on the news, on the radio, didn't have television then, about the attack on Pearl Harbor on Sunday, December 7th.
I was a midshipman at the Naval Academy, and we knew war was coming. We didn't know when or how, of course. And we were really shocked and surprised.
Me and my shipmate were talking about celebrating my birthday and having a good time on Saturday, December 6th.
Well, I was very young. I had just come home from playing football. I was 17 at the time, and I heard it on a radio. And then I met my friends. We went to the movies, and we were all shook up.
Well, I was asleep in my apartment with my wife out at Waikiki. I got a call about 8 o'clock. It said, "Get down there, we've been attacked."
There were a lot of people, including me, who didn't have a clue as to where Pearl Harbor was. Unless you had someone in the Navy or had been lucky enough to go to Hawaii, nobody knew where it was. No, it was a Sunday morning, and I'd been out late Saturday night, and when I got up, my mother told me Pearl Harbor had been bombed.
I was on a ranch with a horse, scraping manure out of the corral, and we listened to the car radio and heard about the war.
I was at home when I heard about it. My mother was very upset, very upset. I remember there had been a group of girls, and they had gone down to a little restaurant. They had a little restaurant, and they had you could go in there and dance with the jukebox. And they had all been down there jitterbugging, and they came back by our store, to get something to drink, and my mother told them about it.
I was a secretary at the YMCA, and the boys were, and they had a lot of telephone men that used to stay there. And I remember that morning, they were all gathered around that radio listening, and that's when I heard Pearl Harbor had hit. There was such a stillness, you know, when we heard the word. And of course, then I'll tell you, actually see it, you know. Why?
I was in Mississippi in a cotton field, and when I heard about it, the white farmer was riding his horse through the cotton field, and he said, "You heard about the Japs blowing up Pearl Harbor?" And that's where it all started.
Well, of course, you know, we began to hear right away on the radio that the ships were being sunk in the harbor, and that we were at war, and young men were racing to join the Army.
You know, a lot of the guys said they thought the Navy was practicing, or they thought the Army was practicing, and they thought it ridiculous that they were practicing on Sunday. I never had that thought. I knew it was an attack.
You know, it didn't dawn on us that we were being attacked. At least I know I didn't.
I was sleeping, and when I heard the bombs go off, jumped up, ran out to the front of the barracks, and I could still hear the bombs, and I looked up and saw the planes going over, and I saw the red ball on the side.
And I saw that rising sun ball on the wings, that red ball. Holy mackerel, my heart dropped down to my knees.
A great many had seen the airplanes going by with a big meatball on the rising sun on the sides of the airplanes.
When that Japanese plane flew over my head, I knew we were in war.
It's war, and the impact of it just makes you almost freeze, you know.
I was thinking war. I was absolutely thinking war, because I felt like, you know, this is the way it was going to be.
Things were in the islands, it was just so confusing. You just didn't know where to go or what to do, and anybody grab you and tell you to do something, you did it.
When they came through, they were all lined up, wing to wing, with 1,700 gallons of 100-octane gas. So when the Jap Zeros came in, boy, they just strafed them all, and that was it.
There were so many planes flying around, it was impossible to count how many it was. When I heard the first explosion, that was one of the bombs hitting at Pearl. Because, see, Pearl Harbor and Hickam Field are side by side.
When we got within 200 miles of Pearl, we were on a search mission that morning. We went on a search mission every morning and afternoon. We had been ordered to maintain radio silence and not to use the radios. We were to land at Pearl Harbor, Ford Island. As we neared Oahu, we heard, "Don't shoot, don't shoot, this is an American plane." So we continued on, and as we neared Oahu, we could see smoke coming up over the island, and we could also smell the spent ammunition. I knew something was happening, but I didn't know what. We used hand signals, like using the Morse code to hit our head. I batted on my head, you know, what's happening? And they said, you know, Pearl Harbor was being attacked.
Now, I did see the Arizona blow up. Now, we were that close to Pearl Harbor that over the buildings I could see the smoke. When that ship blew up, you knew something bad had happened over there. And all of a sudden, there was the darndest explosion you ever heard right outside the barrack, right outside the mess hall. So I ran to the door to see what was going on, and as I opened the door and looked up Hangar Avenue, hangars 7 and 9 went up. Debris flying everywhere. And I thought, what in the world? An airplane blew up in the hangar?
Then I looked over to the ship service, and I saw all of the people, the service people, running out and heading for the hills. So I went around the corner of the barracks and looked down and saw everything in flames. So we, all of us, you know, by now, everybody else is up and we're running. We're running down to the hangar.
But anyway, now I run outside and I'm all excited and shook up, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'm looking around and looking at all these airplanes flying around, and some guy was standing under the eave of another building. He reached out, grabbed me, and pulled me under there. And I didn't more than get under there. Here come another plane, machine gunning. And he took off about an inch or 2 inches of the eave of the building that we were standing under.
And about that time, another flight came over, and they dropped some 500-pound bombs in the hangar.
You know, we saw the smoke, but when we neared the island, we could see the end of the second attack. Guys were taking stretchers by me, and you know, it was a continual line of guys who hadn't been injured, taking bodies over to the hospital.
Young man that was running with me, I didn't know him, had his side torn off from the shrapnel. So there wasn't nothing I could do, so I went on into the hangar.
So I went up Hangar Avenue, and somebody jumped out of one of the hangars and grabbed me and said, "You got to help me get these wounded over to the hospital."
I saw the most ungodly sight anyone ever wants to see. We've all seen those pictures of Battleship Row with the Arizona in flames and Oklahoma upside down, and the battleships that were in the exposed row were sunk. It was an ugly mess because the fire from the burning oil from the Arizona was drifting down. The West Virginia alongside us had been severely bombed and torpedoed and sunk. But what was kind of eerie is the flames from the Arizona were towering many feet into the air, and they illuminated us perfectly. All the rest of the Hawaiian Islands were completely black.
I don't know how I escaped getting hurt, but I did. I survived that day. Anybody says he wasn't scared that day, he's a liar. Because we had no defense. They knocked out about 95% of our fighter planes right on the ground up at Wheeler. And we had no defense. Oh yeah, we were crippled. We had hardly anything left to fight with. You know, Admiral Yamamoto said, he said, "I'm afraid all we have done is awakened the sleeping giant." And he was right.
I didn't have a good feeling about the Japanese before the attack, and it was a hell of a lot worse after the attack. And I thought that we needed to get going and do something now, right now.
The main thing it did was get us mad and started a war. Their planning was superb, and their execution of the attack was superb. They had a much better, more modern fleet than we did. The greatest loss we had at Pearl Harbor that affected our war effort ultimately was the 2,000 some odd people who were killed.
The biggest thing is keep this country prepared. That's the biggest thing. Our slogan at the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association is, remember Pearl Harbor, keep America alert. That's our slogan.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. You will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
In 1944, when the invasion came, we were so happy, you know. My father knew the invasion was coming, but because he listened to the radio all the time, but we didn't know where, and we thought probably Holland or Zeeland, because that's where the border is, it's easier to get in. And for 2 weeks we had to sit up, straight up in the chair in the night with 2 pairs of clothing on, and we all had our ID in a linen sack around our neck, and $100 each, because we didn't know what would happen. We might get separated, you know.
There in England, we knew something was going on, but we didn't know about the invasion. We anticipated that eventually we'd be going over across the channel to France. We anticipated that. At that time, I didn't realize the enormity of the invasion itself.
And I looked as far forward as I could see and as far back as I could see. This was ships. And it was then that struck me how immense this operation was and what was really going on, what I was a part of.
Well, I knew about D-Day. I knew when it was, and it wasn't, of course, because it did not come off the day they expected it to. Because I worked in the message center, I knew it, but we all knew something was going on because they were asking for blood for transfusions, and we were getting a lot of people staging through there that were going someplace. We didn't know where, you know, but...
Everything was D-Day. All our 9 months training was for the D-Day invasion. By far the most exciting day of my life. I remember before we were talking tough, we'd say, we're going to jump that channel and we're going to bite Hitler in the ass. But when it came to the time of the mission, we were kind of scared and concentrating on what we did.
Well, we knew it was going to happen because we were in England about 3 weeks, and it was just lousy with people and trucks and, you know, material. But nobody seemed to know when.
So we left Plymouth on June 5th, and everybody said, I guess this is it, you know, but it really was going to be it. And then we found out later it wasn't going to be it. It was June 6th because it was the water was too rough for a landing. So I guess Eisenhower made up his mind to make it the 6th. So we sailed slowly across the channel.
The Germans had kind of figured it was real rough. It was rough and windy, and they figured that we wouldn't invade at that time.
When they finally invaded the coast, troops started rolling, and they just kept rolling, and they rolled all the way to Berlin. But D-Day was the start of it all.
D-Day was 1,000,000 4th of Julys put together. Never saw a thing in my life like it. We were all young kids, fresh, 18. I think the average age in the first wave was 19 years and 4 months. And 7,500 died. That's what's bad. I still remember it.
We were right over the column of ships was traveling from England. We're following the same route as the ship. And I looked down, and this was a 2 or 3 abreast. These ships were traveling. The wake was, you could see all the ships distinctly. See that we jumped on the night, that evening. It was 11:05 French time that we landed in Normandy, and it was 0600 the next morning that the assault on the beaches, the amphibious assault started. And 6,500 vessels were involved, 12,000 aircraft.
When we dropped the paratroopers on D-Day, there was a land fight going on. When we came in the night before, we had dropped Pathfinders. There was a group of real tough paratroopers that laid out zones with colored panels and flares, and we dropped over that was our drop zone. It was scary for us too, but the excitement of the moment kind of overcame the fear. You were too, you know, the adrenaline was running. You were ready to go.
A lot of the glider troops were killed in the crash landing, and I tried to help excavate or to help get people out of some of the gliders. We got the red light, was meant to prepare for jump, and everybody was to stand up. You stand up and you hook up on the static line that goes the length of from the front of the aircraft to the rear. When you hook up, that's attached to the parachute, so when you go out the door, it automatically extends out and pulls the parachute out. We had so much equipment on with the parachute that all of us couldn't stand up and hook up at the same time.
What really got me was the battleships firing their 16-inch guns and destroyers. Everything was exploding. And that's what was going on Omaha Beach.
We were going to land on Omaha Beach, Red 1, which was right close to Point Duhok. It was a kind of a high point that stuck out from the coast, and there was a pillbox right up on the apex that had to be neutralized because it covered both Omaha Beach and Utah Beach, which were the two main landing areas that the American troops were going to land on. We were supposed to clear objects in the water. The beach was well fortified with all kinds of obstacles that the Germans had put out in the water to intercept ships.
Where they landed in Normandy, the Germans were waiting for them, you know. I mean, they had pillboxes, they had and when those landing crafts landed there, they ran into a lot of obstacles, you know.
And they were splitting in half, going down, and guys jumping overboard. Now, I'm 19 years old. I thought it was a movie. You know, I'm looking at this, and I realized, hey, we're really in a war. And I felt sorry for them. I looked at what was going on. I said, I don't know how anybody could get through this.
There were places where the ramps went down and the guys had to walk in. Those are the guys that needed the attention because they were hurt, they were shot, because they were in boats already. They were a good target for the guys, for the Germans up on the mountain there.
The Germans who were at the higher level had an advantage where they could just look right down at you with their weapons firing.
The Germans had been there for 4 years, and they were very implanted. They started firing in there, and they blew the side of that LST whole complete off. I'm on this side over here, and I could see where things was coming apart, and I looked for Charlie, couldn't find him, and all of a sudden I had another explosion, and that's when I started noticing that my legs wasn't working anymore. At that time, I made a deal with the Lord and said, hey, I don't want to die in this beach, and if you save me, I'll serve you for the rest of my life.
We were unloaded from a transport into LCBP, the landing craft, at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And we moved back and forth in the channel until 6:30. And that's when the first wave went ashore. And we got about 100 yards off the beach and the shelling stopped. And there was a complete silence for about, I guess, maybe 5-6 minutes until the Germans came up out of their holes and started shooting back. I was about 2/3 of the way back, luckily for me, because when they dropped the ramp, an 88 shell hit the ramp. And the first 30 soldiers didn't get their feet wet. They just died on the spot. And they blew the rest of us over the sides or wounded us, but I made it on the beach. I picked up a Thompson from another dead soldier, pardon me, and ammo. and I was only on the beach an hour and a half, and I got wounded 3 times.
My 4 hours on that beach seemed like 4 days. You know, it seemed like it would never end. But everything was happening very fast too.
Constantly, the boats were being hit. Guys in the water, screaming and hollering.
These guys was out there, and they were screaming for help. And so I go back and try to get the people, the soldiers that I could help. I went back to try to get them. And so then all of a sudden, I guess I lost a lot of blood.
So even when you got on the beach, well, you had a hell of a time. The Army had a hell of a time making any progress, but it was very disorganized confusion. There was so many ships unloading troops and trying to send them to the beach. It was something like 140,000 people going to land on probably about a 30-mile stretch of beach. So they were dropping troops off and held 12 to 20 feet of water. And of course they were packing about 80 pounds of gear, you know, and so they were going right to the bottom. Well, some of them were close enough they could have walked out if they'd to the beach, but there was an awful lot of them that were drowned and swimming around. Most of the damage was done by the 88s and machine guns. So many casualties, so many bodies and wounded floating around in there as the boats come in. And we were working around there while we'd help load the wounded into the VP or the landing craft that was going back out to the transport. So we were trying to find the ones that are alive.
The Germans had these 88s that they were on wheels, these 88s, and they were shelling us and then moving them. They couldn't get a bearing on them. My ship couldn't get a bearing on them, so they kept moving these 88 guns, and they were shooting at the barges, and the guys on the hill, everybody was shooting. It was like confusion time, you know? It was like everybody, whatever we learned about invading on maneuvers, when running one area and out the other, all the soldiers, they didn't do the things they were supposed to do. They didn't know about the boats coming up and hurt jumping in, so we had to show them. So as far as the invasion goes, it was just one big confusion. I can't put it any other way.
You didn't know what you were doing. All you knew was you're supposed to get on the beach, get up to the end of the beach and support the troops coming in. I was only a kid. I really didn't know what I was just doing what I was told.
How could you be the same? I mean, you're with a group of guys and you become like band of brothers. And how could you be the same? And you see them just shot right beside you. I mean, just shot out of the water. You know, you couldn't be the same. Because you are like a band of brothers.
Well, it's hard for anybody to really believe that a war situation without seeing it. As I said before, you can draw the analogy of reading in the paper, you think you know. You think you know that's going on. You don't know how much you don't know that until you see it, then you realize this is for real.
Well, the Battle of the Bulge was a terrible battle, really. To start with, it was terrible cold. The Germans were making a counteroffensive because we were getting close to the end of the war and they were losing, and they regrouped, whatever you want to call it, and they come across the Rhine and they came into Belgium there full bore. That's when they surrounded Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne was, and they were going all the way to the Netherlands.
I recall seeing all this equipment coming through Paris, going into the Battle of the Bulge up there in Belgium and Luxembourg.
The weather was horrible. The Germans had broken through because we had bad intelligence. We had a green division that had never been in combat. A lot of college boys were put into it, and the Germans hit it in the middle on a 50-mile front.
And they moved, their object was to get to Antwerp. So they would have us cut in half from the British. But luckily, the weather cleared about 8 days later, and we had air control, and then we hit them very hard, and then they were pushed back.
The German Air Force would strafe just for one person, just come down with the machine gun going that way. I thought to myself, this is for real.
The Germans, they were well trained and well disciplined, but if they lost their leader, why, they were in bad trouble.
Cold weather was the thing that slowed us up more than anything else.
It was winter time and snow covered the ground, and we flew low and slow. Patton had already penetrated into Germany, and the troops were trapped at Bastogne. He reversed course and came back. And we were very carefully briefed because we could see by the tracks in the snow what progress he was making. And he finally made it to the Ardennes forest and to Bastogne. And that turned the tide, and they defeated the Germans, and the war proceeded as normal.
Well, it was very cold winter, and the Germans were trying to take over our troops at that time. They thought they had a good chance of conquering our troops in Germany at that time, in France. But they, of course, didn't.
The Germans were running out of fuel, and they were going to capture the fuel dumps in the Ardennes forest.
We were bombing and where their gasoline was being refined. That was the key. You can have a tank, you can have a plane, you can have motorcycles, you can have cars, but if they don't have gas, you got them. So get the gas.
I know we lost more than half our airplanes on the way because the fighting was so fierce. German fighters attacked us, and the anti-aircraft would attack us because they were trying to preserve the onslaught, trying to reinforce the Germans.
We came around one of those hedgerows, and there was this tank, a German tank, and looking right at us, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, well, this is it.
Once the tank exploded and was hit, it caught fire. And when we did that, when we pulled this young man out, his feet were frozen to the bottom of the tank. And you could just see as the upper part of that 1 foot, the bottom part still remained there.
We were taken really by surprise, I think, Americans. And we lost a lot of guys there. A lot of guys.
We've never had a battle like the Bulge. We've never been hurt. Maybe in a civil war, yes. We're just lucky that we recouped. General Patton sent the 3rd Army to help us, to help the 1st Army that we were in and the 9th.
Well, Ohrdruf was the name of the camp, as the first concentration camp that was captured in Germany. My unit, we approached the camp, the guards at the camp heard about our approach, and so they took all of the prisoners who were able to travel and left. The ones who were not able to travel, they just shot and put in a pile in the courtyard. And when I arrived there, I saw this pile of bodies. I went and checked out the barracks. There were no bodies in the barracks, but there were bunk beds 3 high in these barracks. Our commanders went into the town of Ohrdruf and made some of the people and the mayor come and look at what had happened. They claimed they didn't know what was going on there. And what I heard was the next day, after we made them check it out, the mayor and his wife committed suicide. Later, after we left, I think General Eisenhower, General Patton, and a couple of other generals came to look at these dead bodies in this camp, and I understand that General Patton had to throw up and he started to cry.
At the end of the war, we were still in Germany, and Eisenhower had recommended that we all go through Buchenwald, the concentration camp. And we did 2 days after it was liberated. And that's why we were over there. I cannot adequately describe it to you. You've probably heard about it many times. You see the bodies, the skinny bodies racked up in the yard.
But I saw a bunch of prisoners get off of a train in Rouen. I couldn't believe they were alive. They still had on their strappy uniforms and the gaunt, big, bulgy eyes, big elbows, but they were just skin and bones. How they could even stand up, I don't know. There was about 15 or 20 of them got off that train.
What I remember seeing there, and what really touched me a lot, I didn't want to come up that way. These guys look like they haven't been fed. They all were skinny, really abused, and I didn't know if my time was coming next. And the Germans just was really horrible to them, and they lined them up out front.
Well, Hitler evidently had a lot of the people convinced that they were the Aryan race, the perfect race. They didn't want what they called Untermensch, I think. They advocated the euthanizing people that were crippled or a little bit loco or anything that wasn't what they considered to be a perfect human being. Gone.
The Germans couldn't stop the killing. I mean, whoever was in charge of that camp where they poisoned the people there, I mean, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe a human soldier can do that. What they did, I mean, 6 million Jews and all that, regardless of the people, just the idea that 6 million people put to the gas chamber, it's hard to believe. Not in this world, but it happened.
You know, people that say that this Holocaust did not happen, just never saw those patients. They never saw the pictures and things that went on, and how sad it was. In fact, somebody said they were trying to take World War II out of the Holocaust out of the history books. And how sad that is.
They don't want to hear about it. I've had people in the American Legion tell me, and these guys were supposedly veterans, that said they didn't think the Holocaust happened. And I told this one guy, I said, I was there, I went through Buchenwald and I described it, and he come over and he hit me on the chest. He says, I still don't believe it. And man, I had to use some self-control. I had to walk away from him. I'd have crippled him. I would have crippled him. To think that a person would be so ignorant that they don't believe what happened. But there are a number of people that believe it never happened. I think we're slowly coming around because we now have the Holocaust museums, and it's been exposed enough. And I can't be too, how should I say, I think everybody ought to know about it. Because that was something I've never seen, such inhumanity, inhuman treatment. Boy.
It happened, and it was terrible. You don't have to be a Jew to understand the horror that they put up with.
I landed in Iwo Jima about the second or third wave to hit the beach in the landing craft.
I watched the first wave go in, on the landing barges. The 16-inch guns were getting their shells right in the caves. We had spotter planes up, and they directed the ammunition right into the caves.
They were firing at us. We could see bullets hitting the water alongside of us, and they hit the bow of the boat, and the mortar blew the ramp clear off, and we sunk.
We were looking through the binoculars, and I saw the Marines invading, and they were really knocking them down. The Marines were getting really pummeled.
When the Marines went in, the Japs was there, and they killed almost every Marine that hit the beach.
We strafed the beach on Iwo Jima to kind of a protection for the invading Marine. When you see those guys going down like flies on the beach there and not getting up, you know that they were either dead or badly wounded. And it really made you reflect on it. It's something.
There were a lot of dead. When I got there, they were floating all in the water and everything else. It's easy to remember those things because you're there. We were under fire constantly.
One of my acquaintances, he was in the Marines, and he went into Iwo Jima, and he got half his head blown off.
4 guys next to me, sailors, were strapped in their guns, 20 millimeters. They were all decapitated.
We had a lot of shell-shocked poor Marines. I mean, they just go starry-eyed, shaken, and you could lead them by the arm. They could walk, but they didn't know what they were doing. So what you do, you take them down, you put them to bed on the ship. They'd sleep for about 12, 14 hours. They'd wake up, be okay. Just scared to death. Our ship was evacuation hospital ship. So we had doctors aboard, and I took doctors into the beach in the middle of the night, which was one of the scariest parts. They had to have one of the brain surgeons go in the middle of the night, and I landed him on the beach, or landed the landing craft on the beach. I helped him on the operating table on board our ship. I mean, when they got brain head, they just cut the skull and laid the brain out on a piece of napkin, cut parts of it away, plug it back up again. You know, first time I watched that, I had to go over the rail and throw up, come back, and then I could watch it, but it was bad. We had all these wounded, I mean, the whole shipload of guys on cots, all wounded. And then a lot of them, you know, were dead. So they loaded them into a landing craft, dead bodies, stacked up like cordwood. Then they put a canvas over the top of them. And I can remember standing on the rail of the ship, looking down at it, and the wind blew the canvas over. And there was this blonde-headed kid laying there. It's just, I think that hit me more than almost anything. But we buried quite a few out to sea, too, that have a sea burial. They're on a board on the railing, and there's a canvas over the body, and I think he's all put in a bag, and they have a ceremony and a talk and a speech, and then they tip it and drop him into the ocean as the ship's going down through the ocean.
The amount of people that we lost on Iwo on both sides was just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I saw all the White Crosses at Iwo. I didn't leave until the island was over. When we got them real down to the end of the island, the Japanese, they made that final banzai attack, and it was hand-to-hand. We had hand-to-hand.
Finally, the Marines went over there by hand with machine gun, their rifles, and about 15 Japs come running out of that hole with their hands up. They just mowed them down.
Oh, when they took Iwo Jima, why, then we had a place for the wounded planes to land. A lot of people don't realize it, but if you lose an engine, it takes more gasoline to get home than it does when you have 4 engines, because you can run them at a leaner rate, and you can stay at altitudes, and you can find your tailwinds to come on back.
I watched all the fighting, watched them go up on the mountain, watched the flag go up, watched it come down, watched the second flag go back up again, and then when the first flag went down, we thought, my gosh, they took over. And then the second flag went up again. It was a bigger one. So I watched that, and I used to get mad because all the glory was for the second flag, and I felt sorry for those first guys that put the first flag up. And it was a lot of years before that finally came out.
When the atomic bomb was dropped. And we were very confused that day, because here we were out here on this little island, and all the ships out in the sea were blowing their horns and raising flags and making noise. We didn't know what was going on. So finally, from the communications obtained from the ships, we found out that a bomb had been dropped on Japan, and the war would probably be over. And that's the way we found out how the war was going.
That was one of the major decisions that Truman made, was dropping that atomic bomb. That saved one heck of a lot of people on both sides. And if that hadn't happened, if they hadn't surrendered, we'd have probably lost a tremendous amount more.
A lot of people were condemned the army or the government for bombing Nagasaki or all that with the atom bomb. But they don't realize that there would have been hundreds of thousands of us soldiers getting killed just trying to invade. Because those people didn't care if they got killed. They were suicide, you know, like the kamikazes and things like that.
When they dropped the bomb, they were training me for the invasion of Japan. And my mom had lost one boy already. Had I gone over there, who knows? They were estimating maybe 1 million casualties.
But if they hadn't have surrendered, MacArthur had a 1 million-man army sitting over on Okinawa, ready to come on in. And if he had, our casualties would have been 1 million people, and their casualty, Japan, would have been wiped out.
I can surmise that it would have been a very, very bloody ordeal like Okinawa. I would imagine they would have fought us to the last person alive, almost. They would have been so dishonored and bound to survive our invasion that even the women and children would have fought us. I'm sure that's the kind of reception we would have had we made that landing.
We were getting ready to invade Japan. They estimated 1.5 million casualties, and our unit was included in that 1.5 million casualties. So Truman said, no, I'm not going to subject 1.5 million troops to that. Gonna go ahead and gave the green light to drop the A-bomb. That's when they got the crews together at Tinian, and that's when they gave the orders. Nobody knew squat about where they were going or anything. They just knew they had this specific mission. Their destination was classified. Not even the people on the same base knew where they were going. Nobody was allowed near the aircraft involved, unless, you had the commander's permission. Even some of the aircrew had no idea. They knew they were something special, but they didn't know what or for why. We were between the Philippine Islands and Japan, and so when we flew over Hiroshima and Nagasaki at about 1,200 feet, and we got a look at what we did. And you could see these people, those that survived, were wandering around, and the skin was peeling off of them, and some of the guys got sick. By the time we got to the next corner, the same people that we saw walking were now dead, and we were burying them at the rate of 3,000 a day. We were told, don't get emotionally involved. Well, it's easier said than done. When you see the carnage firsthand, and you say, now, if the Japanese could have done it, they would have done it to us. We know that Hitler wanted to do it, but he couldn't get across the Atlantic.
Seeing people die, friends, people you knew,
Most of them young men, young, probably less than 30 years old. You just accept it.
No, I'm not afraid to die. And like I said, I was with a whole bunch of young men that mostly all of them were about 18, 19 years old. Mostly all of them that I went into combat with. So they're all good men, good men.
I guess I was too young to realize what was going on.
You're scared, but you're 19 years old.
Young kid, right? You grow fast, I guess.
You know, at that age, I was invincible. I really, you know, I never thought of myself getting killed or anything.
They were just kids. They were just in their early 20s.
I was 18. I thought I knew everything. You know, 18 years old, you know everything. Yeah. At least I thought I did.
You're sort of numb. After you start seeing death, you start to get used to it, if you call it getting used to it, and you just go on. You cannot stop, or they'll take you. You just got to go, and it's not selfishness. It's the job you're doing. It's them or you.
But you don't realize what's going on. It didn't affect me till the next day. Then I knew, hey, we're in this for real. I can get killed.
You know, you're in the middle of combat. All you're worrying about is doing your job, getting them ashore so they can do theirs, and go back and get more men to back them up.
No man wanted to die. And they had, again, we're back to, they had faith in that this corpsman and this stretcher team could get them back to where it was safe. Many times the men died on the stretchers. Many times they walked in on their own, or you carried one in.
You know damn well that from one day to the next, whether you live or whether you don't, so you lived it day by day. That's it.
Well, I wonder if this is my time. And that's the way it is, you know. You say, well, maybe I have 15 seconds to live. And maybe today's the day I'm going to die. And you get used to it. And I don't worry about that.
I've been so close to death so many times that it didn't mean anything anymore. You just, if it's going to happen, it'll happen like that.
I'd already gone through a real tragic thing watching men that I had went overseas with be killed right away. My first really encounter of any kind of combat. And I was 18 years old at that time.
No, you have to have faith, otherwise when you're at war, you got to hope you survive. That's it. That's the name of the game, I think. You know, I was only 18 or 19 years old then, so. But if you don't have no faith, you're in trouble.
What really hurt was you had breakfast with 28 guys, and then when you came home after 8 or 9 hours, and there isn't 28 anymore, you got to a point where you didn't get too chummy with anybody because it was too much for you when you were with him and had breakfast with him and you knew he was never coming back.
And as we went on, it got closer and closer to guys that I knew personally, guys that I served with, guys that, you know, you saw them at breakfast time and you didn't see them at supper.
And I saw my friends, guys who you ship out with them, you eat out the same mess kit with them and do a lot of other things with them. And you spend, your life is with them and then they're not there.
You know, you get very close to one another when you're in combat situations. It's like losing a family member when one is lost.
Don't think that this freedom that you have is cheap, or don't take it for granted. There's people that died for it. Young people, young soldiers that never had a chance to get married, never had a chance to have children, never had a chance to see their grandchildren, never, nothing like that. They died when they were 18, 19 years old. And that really, in that way, it hurts.
How would I answer that? Freedom means everything.
Too expensive.
Well, the price in dollars has been enormous, but the price in blood is it can't be measured.
Freedom doesn't come free. I don't like to see these young boys shipped back in caskets, and I don't like to see or hear about the loss of life and limb. But it has to be that way because somebody has to stand up for what it is necessary to do to maintain a free country.
I wouldn't trade anything for it. You know, I figured my life hung on the line for that, and I would protect it at any time. I haven't found anything free yet in my lifetime. Somewhere you're going to pay a price.
I love my country. There's nothing like it.
Hopefully through the educational system, our younger people will have not only more appreciation for the freedoms that we have, but a better understanding of what brought about the freedoms that we as Americans enjoy. And I believe that the schools and the educational system would be derelict if they didn't emphasize the importance of the freedoms that we as Americans enjoy.
I don't think that a lot of the young people these days realize the cost of freedom.
Compared to other countries, this is a great country.
All of those that went over, there's an awful lot of them that didn't come back.
Being a prisoner of war makes me appreciate being free.
I can't go by a military cemetery without crying. Because that's why they're there. That is why they're there, for us.
We had a chance when we were back in reserve. We've gone back, then we would have reveille where you got up and you salute the flag. That's when the flag really meant something to me because there was people getting killed and fighting for it.
The flag, to me, and any time that I see it, if I'm not in uniform, I want to do this. If I'm in uniform, I want to salute.
Something that I will always protect. And the burning of the flag does not sit well with me.
Well, it's the epitome of America. I can't think of anything that means more as a symbol of America than the flag. I guess I learned to start saluting it when I was 16 years old, and it still means the same exact thing to me.
That is our flag, it is our country, and that represents our country.
I tell you, it really was nice seeing that flag when you came in after being 1,500 miles from the nearest friendly person for a couple of months and going back and being able to see a friendly territory. That flag was awful nice to see.
Because as long as you could see that flag waving, why, you knew that there was some hope.
It means my life. I mean,
The flag means that it's my flag.
To me, every time I think of it, I get goosebumps. Every time. There's not one time.
It means everything. It means freedom. Matter of fact, I fly a flag every day. If something causes a lump to come in my throat,
Stands for the blood that was shed, the freedoms that we have.
Now I almost start crying. It means a lot. I always have to cry when they sing the national anthem too.
When I see that flag and I hear taps or I hear the Star Spangled Banner, I get very emotional. I love that flag.
you always revere it. I mean, it's the symbol of the country. And I was raised with it.
It's our country's flag, and
I think we should honor that and respect it whenever we see it.
Because as long as you could see that flag waving, why, you knew that there was some hope.
It means I fought for my country and I fight for it again.
It means everything. Freedom, it's a sign of freedom. It's a beautiful thing that we have today.
We have to respect that, because that's our, everywhere in the world, that flag is known as the United States. And people learn to love it.
The flag represents freedom all over the world.
We are so blessed. And we need to definitely pray and that this country will stay that way.
I'm still proud of this country. I'm still proud of our military. And God bless those fellows over there in Iraq. God bless them and God keep them safe.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairie, to the ocean white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
You know, we saw them when they left and when they came back. And that's what was so bad.
I'm grateful and thankful to those who gave of themselves and weren't permitted to return. Valiant souls. Those are the real heroes, those that didn't come back.
Baseball players not heroes. There's not a soul in Hollywood that's a hero. Most of them are buried overseas. These were ordinary people that went and did extraordinary jobs for their country, for their families back here, for the country as a whole.
I'm emotional. You see I'm crying out? For what? 60 years ago it happened. They'll clear my mind. That's the trouble. I can't get rid of. I can't talk to people. For 45 years I didn't tell my wife.
I remember a hell of a lot of it. And I don't like to, because sometimes I dream about it. And I think about it a lot.
You can't forget it. We were attacked. We didn't attack them. They attacked us. When somebody starts a fight, you defend yourself.
A lot of times it seems like another lifetime. And I guess it was another lifetime.
Because I can hear the noises, I can hear the screaming, I can hear the laughter. It's all part of life. You gotta live it. You gotta live through it to understand it.
Because of World War II, the world ended up in a better place for a good many years.
We won the war. We won the war, we beat a dictator and everything else. We showed the whole world how strong we can get. Not by ourselves, we're working with the Allies too. I mean, not just, we all work together and look at the results, you know.
We all believed in the cause. Sometimes I'm not sure now.
It was a war that we had a lot of people that were for it, you know what I mean? And they were supportive of the troops that were out there, whether it were Merchant Marines or the other guys in different branches of service.
I never heard anybody that ever said, well, you know, I don't want to go to war. They all wanted to go to war to defend our country.
A lot of men gave their life for what you have today.
You know, now I'm old, and I know I'm going to die, and I'm ready for it. But in those days, I was going to live forever.
Very few people remember World War II.
I think that a lot of people don't will forget us. And there's a lot of people that that had a lot of families killed, and we're, you know. But now, after over 60 years, it seems like a dream, you know.
There must be at least 1,000 to 1,500 of us that would die every day. We're disappearing, but the memory still lingers with us.
Today, it's essential that the young people have a memory of what America really is. American history should be definitely stressed to the young children of today.
Young kids should never forget that, and they're going to forget it because they're not putting it in the school.
If these young people don't know the history of this country and what it means, then this country will be lost. They have to know the history of this country and know what it means to be free and to be able to do what you want to when you want to. Of course, that's freedom.
You know, Lieutenant, if somebody asks me what I did in the war, I'll tell them I survived. And that's the way it ended.
I gave up a lot of years, but I don't regret any of them. Not one single day. They were well spent.
I'm proud to have done it, but I'm pleased to have been able to do it.
I often say, you know, if I hadn't been a war, I would never have experienced all these things, but I would not to have had it, but it was some experience that I went through that few people went through. I mean, you know, generally, so it was something that it's still in my mind and all that. And I'm proud that I was able to do something, my share. That's all I can say, you know.
I want to say that I feel honored to have represented Las Vegas in the armed forces in World War II, as did many others from our town. It's an honor for me to have served for my community and for what I was able to give, but what I received in being permitted to return to this great nation and our very wonderful city of Las Vegas.
Thank you.